tourists and National Trust rangers saw the legendary Finn disappear into a magical doorway within the rock face here at the Giant's Causeway.
Along the jagged coastline of County Antrim, where the Atlantic crashes against ancient rock with relentless force, a vast expanse of black basalt columns stretches out into the sea like a frozen pathway carved by something far beyond human reach. Each hexagonal stone locks seamlessly into the next, forming eerily precise patterns. For centuries, this place has stirred awe, confusion, and legend in equal measure. So when footage surfaced online claiming to show a massive stone door shifting open within the Giant's Causeway, it ignited renewed obsession. In fact, rumors are that what they saw inside the moving stone door is so terrifying, even scientists wanted it gone. But to truly understand this story, we must travel back in time first. The Giants of Ireland. Along the northern coast of Ireland, the landscape barely feels natural at first glance. Long before geology existed as a science, people standing before this impossible-looking coastline thought of it very differently from how we treat it today. In ancient Irish storytelling, the architect of the Causeway was the mighty giant Fionn mac Cumhail, known in later English adaptations as Finn McCool. Fionn was no ordinary figure in Irish mythology. He was portrayed as a warrior, hunter, and protector, a man of immense power whose stories spread through generations of oral tradition long before they were ever written down. According to legend, Fionn's greatest rival lived across the water in Scotland. His name was Benandonner, another giant whose reputation for strength echoed across the narrow channel separating the two lands. Over time, the insults between them grew so fierce that Fionn finally decided there was only one way to settle the matter. He would walk to Scotland himself. The problem, of course, was the sea. So Fionn began building. The legend says he tore enormous chunks of stone from the Irish coast. Then he hurled them into the water one after another. Massive blocks crashed into the waves, sinking into place until a jagged roadway stretched across the channel toward Scotland. Stone by stone, the pathway expanded outward into the sea, forming what later generations would call the Giant's Causeway. Even today, the formation's interlocking columns create the eerie illusion of an ancient road disappearing into the Atlantic horizon. But the most memorable part of the legend arrives when the confrontation finally seems unavoidable. After completing the bridge, Fionn catches sight of Benandonner approaching from Scotland, and suddenly the fearless Irish giant hesitates. Benandonner, as it turns out, was far larger and more terrifying than Fionn expected. Seeing the panic in her husband's eyes, Fionn's wife Una quickly devises a plan. She disguises her enormous husband as a baby, wrapping him in blankets and placing him inside a cradle. When Benandonner finally storms into their home searching for his rival, Unagu greets him calmly and warns him not to wake the sleeping child. Curious, the Scottish giant approaches the cradle and peers inside. There lies the baby, already gigantic even in infancy. Benandonner stares in horror. If this child is so enormous, he reasons, then what kind of monster must the father be? Fear takes hold instantly. Rather than risk facing Fionn, Benandonner flees back toward Scotland in panic. As he runs across the stone causeway, he tears the pathway apart behind him, ripping massive sections of rock from the sea so the Irish giant cannot pursue him. According to the legend, the shattered remains of that escape are what survive today along the northern Irish coast. Broken fragments of an ancient giant's bridge stretching out into the Atlantic. Stories of giants like these became deeply embedded in Irish cultural identity. Some of the earliest surviving references to Ireland's mythic past appear in the Liber Gabála Érenn, or Book of the Taking of Ireland, compiled around the 11th century from much older oral traditions. The text blended mythology, pseudo-history, genealogy, and folklore into an attempt to explain Ireland's origins and ancient inhabitants. Later works, such as the Annals of the Four Masters, compiled in the 17th century, continued to preserve stories of legendary warriors, supernatural beings, and gigantic figures said to have once walked the land. Medieval chronicles occasionally referenced unusually large skeletons or bones discovered in fields and coastal areas, often interpreting them through the lens of giant folklore. You see, pre-scientific societies regularly encountered fossils without understanding extinction or prehistoric life. Mammoth bones, whale vertebrae, and mastodon remains has sometimes emerged from eroding cliffs, riverbanks, or exposed earth. To people living centuries before paleontology, those enormous remains naturally seemed like evidence of colossal human-like beings. Around the world, many ancient cultures interpreted fossils through myths of giants, titans, or monsters, and Ireland was no exception. The Giant's Causeway itself encouraged those beliefs. Rising from the sea in nearly perfect polygonal patterns, the columns appear strangely artificial even today. More than 40,000 basalt pillars fit together with remarkable geometric precision. Some reach heights of nearly 12 meters. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the Causeway had become famous far beyond Ireland. Travelers from Britain and continental Europe journeyed to the remote coastline to witness the strange formation for themselves. Artists, including Susanna Drury, created detailed watercolor paintings of the basalt columns, emphasizing their symmetry and almost supernatural appearance. Her work became widely admired and helped cement the Causeway's reputation as both a geological marvel and a place wrapped in myth. Tour guides and local storytellers expanded the legends further, attaching stories to specific rocks, cliffs, and formations. Visitors were not simply observing geology. They were stepping into a living narrative shaped by centuries of folklore. Even scientific investigation struggled to fully separate the site from its mythology at first. When Sir Richard Bulkley presented one of the earliest formal descriptions of the Causeway to the Royal Society in 1693, debate still existed over whether the formations were natural or artificially created. Today, the site is managed by the National Trust, which continues to embrace both the scientific and mythological sides of the Causeway. Educational displays explain the volcanic origins of the basalt columns, while visitor materials still prominently feature Fionn mac Cumhail and the legendary bridge to Scotland. The myths remain inseparable from the experience because they provide something science alone cannot fully replace: atmosphere, imagination, and emotional connection to the landscape. And that enduring fascination helps explain why modern internet stories about moving stone doors, hidden chambers, or trapped giants spread so quickly online. Viral videos often borrow the same ingredients that made the old legends powerful in the first place: mysterious stone formations, unexplained spaces, ancient beings, and the suggestion that something impossible might still be hidden beneath the cliffs. Myths in motion: the viral stone door and the hidden chamber. A colossal slab of stone appears to shift open among the dark basalt formations of Ireland's Giant's Causeway, exposing what looks like a hollow darkness hidden inside the cliff before sealing shut again. The movement lasts only seconds, but that is exactly why it spreads so quickly online. Short clips leave room for imagination, and the Giant's Causeway is already the kind of place that seems built for legends. Even before the internet transformed mysteries into viral entertainment, people standing on that coastline often described the landscape as unnatural, almost engineered. The setting itself does half the work. Within hours of the moving stone door clip appearing online, social media platforms exploded with reposts, slowed-down versions, dramatic zoom-ins, and sensational captions. Videos claimed archaeologists had discovered hidden chambers beneath the Causeway. Others insisted the footage showed proof of giant-built structures connected to ancient Irish mythology. Some channels added fake narration about sealed tunnels, unexplained radar scans, or government cover-ups. The darker the storytelling became, the more engagement the clip generated. Millions of viewers encountered the footage stripped entirely of its original context. And that context changes everything. The viral clip was not leaked archaeological footage or accidental evidence of something hidden beneath the rocks. It originated as a promotional media feature connected to Antaisi, often referred to as the National Trust for Ireland, an organization involved in preserving Irish natural and cultural heritage. The original material was edited and repackaged online to appear mysterious and ominous. Modern viral mystery culture thrives on taking ordinary footage and reframing it through suspense. A strange camera angle becomes evidence. Shadows become figures. Geological formations become doors. In the case of the Giant's Causeway, the environment makes those reinterpretations especially effective because the location already carries centuries of folklore attached to it. Even official tours through the site reference legendary features tied to Irish mythology, including formations nicknamed the Giant's Boot, the Giant's Organ, and the Wishing Chair. Stories of Fionn mac Cumhail still dominate how many visitors emotionally experience the landscape. And visually, the coastline plays tricks on the human brain constantly. The basalt formations are scarred by millions of years of erosion from salt spray, Atlantic storms, temperature shifts, and wave impact. Cracks split the rock in sharp geometric lines. Deep fissures create shadows that appear far darker than they really are. Certain angles produce illusions of symmetry or movement when light shifts across wet stone. Combined with drone footage and selective editing, natural rock formations can easily appear to slide, open, or conceal hidden spaces. But beyond the geology lies something even more interesting: human psychology. Humans are pattern detection machines. Long before modern science existed, survival depended on quickly identifying meaningful shapes, movements, or threats in chaotic environments. It was safer for early humans to mistakenly assume something had agency than to ignore a possible danger. That instinct never disappeared. Cognitive scientists refer to this tendency as pattern recognition bias, or apophenia, the brain's habit of finding intentional meaning in random or natural phenomena. It explains why people see faces in clouds, hear hidden messages in static noise, or interpret unusual rock formations as artificial structures. The Giant's Causeway triggers that instinct perfectly. The columns are so geometrically regular that they almost seem manufactured. Their polygonal arrangement appears deliberate, as though someone or something placed them there by design. So when viewers watch a section of rock appear to shift like a doorway, their brains instantly begin constructing a narrative around it. Secret chambers, buried civilizations, sleeping giants, ancient technology. Historically, this is exactly how the site accumulated its layers of story. Long before geology explained basalt cooling and fracture patterns, the causeway was understood through myth. Over time, that single narrative expanded into a wider cultural imagination where every unusual rock formation gained meaning. Stepping stones became giant pathways, isolated columns became watch points, and shadowed gaps were reinterpreted as entrances to something hidden below. Even today, modern viral interpretations recycle similar themes, such as claims of buried chambers, acoustic anomalies, shifting stone doors, or suppressed discoveries, because the landscape already carries centuries of storytelling weight. But when these ideas are stripped back and examined against real geology, the explanation is far less cinematic, but far more consistent. The door, the chamber, and the hidden world are not features in the rock. They are features of perception, built from pattern recognition, folklore memory, and the human tendency to turn visually ambiguous structures into narrative. The mind reaches for explanations that match the emotional atmosphere of the image. Then the internet amplifies it. Myths versus reality. Beyond the layers of folklore, giants, and storytelling that cling to the Giant's Causeway like sea mist, the real history of the site is also truly fascinating in its own right. The story begins during the Paleogene period, roughly 50 to 60 million years ago, when the world was undergoing dramatic tectonic change. What is now Northern Ireland sat near an active rift system as the North Atlantic Ocean began to open. This was an era of instability, where the Earth's crust fractured and magma surged upward in enormous volumes. Volcanoes erupted across the region with overwhelming force, releasing vast rivers of basaltic lava that poured over valleys and lowlands. Temperatures exceeded 1,200 degrees Celsius, or 2,192 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to liquefy rock and erase nearly everything in their path. Forests vanished beneath molten stone. Ancient landscapes were buried under glowing, shifting sheets of lava that moved under gravity like thick, burning currents, seeking the lowest points in the terrain. What we see today as a calm, structured coastline was once a battlefield of heat and motion. Then came the cooling. As these massive lava fields began to lose heat, the surface solidified first while the interior remained molten. This created tension. Like drying mud that cracks as it shrinks, the cooling basalt began to fracture. But on this scale, the stress was distributed evenly, and the rock responded as such. Cracks propagated downward, splitting the hardened lava into tightly packed columns. Most formed hexagonal shapes, though nature allowed variation. 4, 5, 7. Even occasionally 8-sided columns appear where local conditions shifted. The result is what we now recognize as approximately 40,000 interlocking basalt pillars extending from the cliffs of Antrim into the Atlantic like a frozen cascade of geometry. Some rise over 12 meters high, standing as silent remnants of volcanic chaos turned into order. To early observers, this kind of regularity demanded explanation beyond natural processes. When Sir Richard Bulkley presented early observations of the formation to the Royal Society in 1693, he described it with fascination but without a complete geological framework. Later, in the 18th century, French geologist Nicolas de Marest compared similar structures in France's Auvergne volcanic fields and began recognizing a shared volcanic origin. Over time, scientific understanding expanded, linking the Giant's Causeway to a broader volcanic province that once stretched across the early North Atlantic, including formations on what is now the Isle of Staffa in Scotland, where similar basalt columns appear at Fingal's Cave. From a distance, the illusion is powerful. The causeway seems to extend directly into the sea in a sequence of stepping stones, as if deliberately constructed to reach towards Scotland. For centuries, this visual effect fed mythology. But this bridge is not a structure at all. It is a fragment of once continuous lava flows, later fragmented by tectonic shifts, rising sea levels, and relentless coastal erosion over millions of years. What remains is a broken edge of a much larger volcanic system, reinterpreted by human imagination as a purposeful path. Even the sensory experience of the causeway contributes to its mythic reputation. Visitors often describe faint hums, subtle vibrations, or shifting tones carried by the wind. Yet these effects arise from entirely physical processes. The interlocking columns and coastal caves act as natural resonance chambers. Atlantic winds passing through narrow gaps generate low-frequency whistles, while waves, striking the basalt, transmit vibrations through dense rock. Under storm conditions, these sounds combine into layered acoustic effects that can resemble distant voices or rhythmic pulses. In quiet conditions, especially at night, human hearing becomes more sensitive to these subtle frequencies, enhancing the illusion of something alive within the stone. The landscape itself continues to change, but only on geological timescales far slower than human perception. Freeze-thaw cycles force water into cracks, where it expands in winter and gradually widens fractures. Storm waves remove small fragments of rock over centuries, while biological growth, such as moss, algae, and lichen, alters the surface texture. These processes create the impression of transformation, but they operate incrementally, not dramatically. Modern monitoring by the National Trust and Geological Surveys confirms that while erosion is ongoing, the structure of the causeway remains stable. There is no evidence of hidden chambers, shifting formations, or anomalous internal voids. At the microscopic level, the geometry of the columns reveals something even more elegant than mythology. As lava cooled, contraction stresses naturally organized fractures into repeating polygonal patterns. Among these, hexagons are statistically favored because they distribute stress efficiently while minimizing energy. This same principle appears elsewhere in nature, such as in honeycombs, drying mud, and frozen surfaces, where systems settle into stable, repeating shapes under uniform pressure. And yet, despite all of this explanation, the emotional impact of the causeway does not diminish. Standing among those columns, hearing the Atlantic crash against black stone, watching light shift across geometric edges, it is easy to understand why earlier cultures reached for myth. The human mind is built for meaning. It connects patterns, assigns intention, and builds stories from structure. Shadows become movement. Echoes become voices. Order becomes evidence of design. In the digital age, the same ancient instinct still shapes how people interpret the Giant's Causeway. Viral claims of moving stone doors, hidden chambers, or buried giants are not new discoveries, but modern versions of a very old psychological reflex, the human tendency to turn visual complexity into narrative meaning. When confronted with striking natural structures like tightly packed hexagonal basalt columns, the mind searches for order, intention, and story. In today's media environment, editing, framing, and selective angles intensify this effect, transforming natural cracks and shadows into apparent entrances or engineered spaces. Yet beneath these interpretations, the scientific explanation remains stable and well-established. But mythology is also deeply embedded in this part of the world. From early Irish communities who saw giants, battles, and supernatural craftsmanship in the landscape, to medieval texts like the Lebor Gabála Érenn and the Annals of the Four Masters that blended myth with history, and even later misinterpretations of fossils as giant remains before modern geology corrected them. Humans interpreted the unknown through storytelling. That tradition continues even today. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.